Welcome to this week's episode of Esports Wrap. Welcome to this week's episode of MOAR Tech. I'm your host, Michael Amorgan, and this week we're going to be talking not about Trump's 10% tariff that's probably going to raise the price of your consoles and phones and other electronics that come from China, or the fact that some of these products will probably be coming from Korea in the near future if this actually goes through, or the fact that Netflix could and might have been tracking your physical activity on your phone if you have the app on there, because they would have requested if for some reason to track how you move, where you are, and based off of what you do and where you go and stuff like that. The kind of stuff that you might be interested in. We're not also talking about Intel's new Cascade Lake 10 or Axe or whatever you want to call them CPUs. We're not talking about how Facebook's removed hundreds of accounts that probably links to the Saudi government, or how they've opened up their child exploitation recognition programs for open source. Thank you for following, by the way, Captain Raptor 12. We're not talking about Ninja moving over to Mixer and what that probably means for streaming on a whole, because he was one of the biggest streamers on Twitch. And we're not talking about Windows 10 finally getting internet-based or cloud-based reinstalls, which is 8 years after the fact that macOS has had them, and we're still going to be waiting for this to be rolled out for Windows 10 because it's in to be announced future update, which means we don't even know the date for when this is going to be announced. Today, what we're going to be talking about is emergency features, and emergency features more so towards the fact of these gadgets that we have just around our home that do so much for us. And when push comes to shove, and if there's an emergency, like, what do we do in a case like that? And many of us don't really know what to do, or have even researched something like that. But when time comes, we're going to wish that we did. And so the first thing that there is your phone. If you have an iPhone, I think since 2017, don't quote me on that, but I believe that's when they first started it. iPhone started off with the ability to have a SOS feature, or an emergency contact. And so what you would do on that is, for the older models, you would rapidly press what they call the sidebar, which we call the power bar. I still don't get why they do that. And something called the emergency SOS will appear. And then you drag that over, and that calls emergency services. Now, after the call ends, it sends your emergency contacts a text message. So you actually have to have them set as emergency contacts. And sends them that with your current location, unless you choose to cancel it. So let's say you've pressed it by accident and so on and so forth, and then you're like, whoops, let me not ping everybody I know that I'm having a near-life experience, near-death experience, so they don't freak out, because I'm actually just fine. And they'll also get an update to say if your location changes. I think it's about every 10 minutes they'll get a notification, and it stops after about 24 hours. So if you get kidnapped, that's a pretty neat way to give your location for at least 24 hours, as long as you have your phone nearby. And even if they find your phone and throw it, at least that gives some location ideas as to where you were and how you moved up to that point. Now, when it comes to iPhone 10, 8, 8 Plus, so on and so forth, it's pretty much the same thing. You press and hold the sidebar, the power bar, and one of the volume buttons this time, though. Not just rapidly pressing it 5 times. You actually have to press and hold, and then the same thing happens. You drag it, and so on and so forth. This time, though, a countdown begins, and it starts an alarm sound. So it's going to make a noise. Be warned. Be warned. So if you're in a situation where you don't want them to know where you are, this might not be the best method anymore. But anyway, the countdown begins. It sounds an alarm. And then, you hold the button down until the countdown ends, and then it automatically makes the phone calls and so on and so forth. Now, Samsung has had something similar for a while now, and to be quite honest, it's been interesting, like how they've had it done. For the most part, you just go inside your settings, inside, I think, advanced features, send SOS messages, and then you have to agree to it because otherwise it's off by default. And then you can send messages to particular contacts. They suggest at least one. Attach pictures, you can attach audio recordings, so on and so forth, and you press the power button quickly 3 times for that to happen, and it does all that kind of good stuff for you. Now, Pixel phones, like mine, or even other Android devices, what do we do? Because we don't have the features of iPhones. We don't have the features of Samsung's custom-built SOS protection. All we really and truly have is something that if something was to happen to us, it gives emergency information. And so, for example, if you were to go into settings, so you drag down, go into settings, and then just for ease of use, I'm going to type emergency. We're going to see that it comes up with some options for emergency information. So we have emergency information, which is about phone, and it flashes where it is inside there. And so that says information and contacts for me. And then from there, we have information like what I'm allergic to, stuff like that, and medications, my address, if I'm an organ donor. I can customize that to say like what type of blood type I am, medical notes, but more importantly, it also gives emergency contact information. So you can actually set contacts. So if something was to happen to you, so they say, to help in an emergency, these contacts can be seen by people with access to your device. And that works pretty well because all you need to do, really, is lock your phone once you put on all this information and slide up. Then you click on emergency, and then there's this button right here that says emergency information. You press that twice and it gives you all the information that was shown that you would have put inside there previously. But that's as far as it really goes, and that's not helpful when you want to try and call the police in a dire situation, or an ambulance, or a fire station, or anything along those lines. So what do you do in cases like that? Well, cases like that, you can either install an application that can do it for you, and there are a number of them. There are Shake to Alert, which allows you to send an alert message with location and audio video to emergency contacts by shaking your phone. It also has a few helpful features such as automatic messaging when meeting someone new for the first time, or automatically letting your emergency contacts know that you've arrived at your destination safely. There's also Emergency, as in SEE. This app allows you to send your location and stream audio and video up to 6 contacts in an emergency by tapping the icon on the screen. Apparently this one was featured on Shark Tank. There's SOS Emergency App, which is a SOS app with a wide variety of SOS messaging features, including emergency services contact information for every country. There's SOS Stay Safe. With the free version of this app, you can send a custom message with your location and remaining battery level to 2 emergency contacts by pressing the power button 3 times. Apparently, the paid version has extra features, which kind of feels a little dubious. Emergency button SOS allows you to, well, it pretty much gives you a button widget to the home screen of your phone, and then when clicked, it sends an emergency message to pre-selected emergency contacts, and then there's Shake to Safety. With this app, you can set up your phone to either call or message an alert with your location to pre-selected emergency contacts by shaking your phone or pressing the power button 4 times in a row. Though apparently that one hasn't been updated in years. So I probably wouldn't go with that one. But what if we don't really want that? Well, there are still some other things. For starters, giving someone access to things like accounts that may have the ability to track your phone is a very key thing that a lot of people use. And there are also some third-party products that do very similar things. So you don't necessarily have to give someone the access to your Gmail or Apple ID. For example, there's an application that I used to use called Prey, P-R-E-Y, that would, in case it's lost, I can wipe the phone, ring it, and so on and so forth. All the good lost your phone features, but it would also take photos of whoever tried to open my phone. This is something that a number of kidnappers and people who deal with your phones typically do. And if it's ever lost, this is also another easy way to track your phone, aka track you, in case something happens to you. So all the person has to do is log into Prey, and now they have access to do what needs to be done to get you back. There are also other methods. And one that Google is actually doing with their Pixel phones, which I'm happy to see that they're doing. And it's a little interesting because they're using Google Duplex to really base off of it. And let me see if I could share with you what this really looks like. So let me see. There we go. So this is what it kind of looks like. It is just something that you press, and it'll allow you to either press to say if it's a fire, if it's police, medical, fire, or police, and it would send your information. So in this example, we have where it's actually using Google's cloud services I should use voice services, aka Duplex, to make it sound like a human, and saying that, quote, "You are being contacted by an automated voice service initiated by the caller. The caller may be unable to speak or hear. My location is this address. The plus code for my location is this." Now, plus codes are a new form of geolocation. Well, I shouldn't say new because they've been around for about a year or two now, but they're a method that's pretty easy for people to figure out, and they're quite used by a lot of different organizations around the world instead of the whole latitude, longitude kind of thing. And then at the end of it, it says, "I require medical assistance, police assistance, there's a fire," so on and so forth. And so this is an easy way for people for these emergency services to get your information as to where you are, and also get whatever's happening, because that's one of the key things as to why things like Google Home and Alexa haven't really had the best of luck when it comes to contacting emergency services. Now, with things like Google Home and Alexa, it's had a tedious thing because it doesn't necessarily have geolocation capabilities. There's no GPS, and I think if there was, a lot of people would have some concerns that their in-home product is actually able to be trackable. And so while it's a good thing to have, uh, even, let me actually take this off. While it's a good thing to have, it can rub some of the people the wrong way. And that's where things like this right here, come into play. Things like emergency alarm or something of that nature. There are a number of different ways that you can do it. You can set up routines. You can set up it to work with things like IFTTT, which is pretty much a online version of scripting things to happen when you give a particular command. So if you were to say, okay, G, or hey, A, call emergency services, then it would know to run, because it has this particular script or command that's scripted. And so, like, do this, do this, do this, do this, then it's going to run that. Without it, though, it doesn't really know what to do. And I want to give an example from Reddit here that actually this apparently saved someone's life. And I'll just quote it from the beginning. Hi, all. I wanted to post a true story that just happened to my 88-year-old grandma in hopes of spreading awareness for other elderly. I was visiting family for Xmas when I saw this post, and I thought it would be perfect for my grandma, who's recently been going blind from macular degeneration. Now, this post was actually someone posting in our videos, showing an 80-year-old Italian grandmother learning how to use Google Home. Anyway, they go on to say, we've been looking at all sorts of magnifying glasses, etc., but I'm an avid home user and insisted on getting one. I went with my mom to the Verizon store and we got her a cheap Android phone, Google Home, and Wi-Fi puck, and set everything up in her house, and then loaded all of her contacts into the phone and removed the lock screen so she could talk to the phone. Smart. If she wanted to call her friends, she had a giant piece of paper with phone numbers written on them because she couldn't see any other way. So Home was a huge improvement. She absolutely loved it because she could play music, find out the weather, make calls to her friends, and even find out what time it was in the day. Fast forward to 1 month. She falls and breaks her hip. No joke. A few rooms away, and was able to yell at the home and to call family members until someone answered, and was able to send an ambulance and break into the home. They say that she's very independent, so it's almost guaranteed she would have laid there with no food, water, bathroom for a couple of days in tremendous pain. She's convinced it saved her life. If this one Reddit post about an old person using it was able to somehow save a life, maybe this will too. Comments go on further to say, like, being disabled and living alone as well. This is apparently a commenter that's going through this. They definitely rely on Google Home as well as Alexa for the same purpose. They have also made a great use of IFTTT, like I mentioned, by adding triggers that can also automatically send texts or emails to friends just by saying things like, hey, G, ask for help, etc. Now, one of the problems with this, though, is that Google Home calling only works in select countries, mainly the United States. So somewhere like where I live, the Bahamas, this can't really work for them unless their phone is nearby and it already has Google Assistant and voice recognition built in some kind of how, or at least to say, you know, hey G, pick up, that kind of thing. But there are ways to still tie it in using that same kind of Tasker. There's an application for phones called Tasker, well, for Androids I should say, that you can set up different commands and that it can actually do certain things. So if you say ask for help, then set an emergency contact or, you know, set up information like that, then Tasker will take it upon itself to then run that script and go through whatever commands that was inside that script that you may have. This may take some bit of know-how, but for a generation like ours to help and set this up for older generations, I think it's worth the effort and time. Plus, then you never know what might happen to us in a similar kind of situation. Now, ironically, it still doesn't give all information like GPS, but the day may come where there might be some kind of communication that happens between your Google Home or Alexa device or HomePod or whatever it is that you use and your phone. And that may be able to give the people information about where it is that you live, what's going on, that kind of thing. But for now, we have to go through these kind of rigmaroles, and it honestly does suck. Personally speaking, there's a lot of features that I would love to use, but because of my location, they just don't work. Or, they just wouldn't work properly. So, for example, here where I live, we don't have, not everywhere has proper street addresses. So if I was to say 1600 Calabrew Avenue, there might not actually be a 1600 Calabrew Avenue. There just may be a Calabrew Avenue which doesn't have a number on the building yet. And even then, not everyone knows or is able to easily see the numbers on these houses. Much less, there are quite a number of streets where I live that still are either unnamed or just aren't marked down properly on things like Google Maps. Quite honestly, there are still roads where I live that Google Maps doesn't actually realize we have roads. And even though it's been there for years, like literal years, but think about 3 years now, which is about the time they took away the ability to edit maps. So I'm going to cut it right about there. But actually, you know what? There's one more that I do want to read. This person, their siblings, and they bought a Google Home for their mom while it was on sale. And she's got limited mobility, and again, another independent, quote-unquote, stubborn person. They have stubborn crossed out, so it's not me saying that. They say, reading your story makes me even more pleased about the purchase. I hadn't even thought about this scenario, but I'll definitely be showing my mom how to make phone calls with her Google Home first and foremost when I set it up for her next week. Now, me personally, I've done something like this with within my own home. I have Google Home here. I have lights that change colors. So, for example, if I was to say, apologies for anyone that's listening to this out loud. Hey Google, make my light pink. And you probably see the color change right over here somewhere. Let me see if I can. Pink light. Hey Google, make my light blue. Like that. And now back to, hey Google, make my light white. Yes, White Pancakes, you are late again, unfortunately. Now, like I mentioned, these kind of simple commands that you can have with your Google Home or your phone or whatever it is can help save lives. So take a look. It's, just go on your phone and go into your Google Home app or Alexa app or, whatever system it is that manages your smart home. And consider going through with something like this and actually setting up a routine, linking it up with something like Tasker, especially even with your own personal device, because if something happens to you, then you can't help others. And not only that, if something happens to you, I'm pretty sure you want to get out of that kind of situation. So, yeah. That's it for this episode of MOAR Tech. We'll be back next week on Tuesdays with Esports Wrap at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show, MOAR Tech, will be back on Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Feel free to join our Discord, which is linked down below. And until next time, guys, take care.